Most of us, I guess, in here today, could probably have recited that gospel after the first sentence or two by heart, because we've heard it so often: love of God, love of neighbor. So really, it doesn't come to us in any shattering or explosive way. It's sort of old hat. But there's three things that we have to remember about that passage. And one is that it does away with any difference between the love of God and neighbor. Even though the lawyer and the old law tended to separate them, part of that, what Jesus said, came from Deuteronomy, part of it came from Leviticus in two different places in the Hebrew scriptures. But Jesus makes sure that we understand that they are combined. If you love your neighbor, you love God. If you love God, you therefore love your neighbor. Easily said. But then the question comes up, well, who is my neighbor? And of course, in those days, the neighbor was a very restricted group of people: your family, your clan, your village, the Jewish people, the people of your own nationality. But of course, elsewhere in the scriptures, Jesus answered the question, who is my neighbor, with the Good Samaritan parable, which indicates that anyone in need is the neighbor. So that expands this whole idea of loving God and neighbor. It becomes a much more all-inclusive commandment. But then we get to the part about loving our neighbor. And I think we should do away with the word love for the next 3 or 4 decades and make substitutions. The present Pope is doing that. He doesn't talk very much about love. Because for most of us, at least in the Western world, love implies something affectionate, liking, being attracted to someone or something. But the Pope talks about mercy towards each other. And the word mercy, if you really examine its basic meaning, means having a heart with someone else. In this case, with someone who is poor, someone who is in need, in other words. And so our heart has to be with them, not in the sense of our affection, but of our assistance. And the other word that he often uses in this regard is the word compassion. Compassion means to suffer with, which is exactly what we're about to commemorate in a few moments at the altar. We commemorate the fact that God was willing to suffer with us by becoming one of us. And that's not just something from ancient history, that is something which is ongoing. God is still suffering with us, because even though in those days it was in the body of the Christ taken from Mary, today it is in the body of Christ that God is suffering, which is all of humanity. And so the sufferings that we experience individually and as a people are also being undergone continually by God in our behalf. So willingness to suffer with the other, having a heart with the needy, is what it means to love. And then we say to ourselves, well, how do I do that? And of course, there's many ways. Some are much more easy than others. If a person is in need, you go and help them. If a person is hungry, you give them a ham sandwich or something in that order. But we have learned in the modern world that the needs of people have become universal. We live in a village now. We don't live on a globe anymore. We live in a village. And the needs are worldwide. Well, how can I do anything about that? We call that the hungers of the world today are not just individual people, but they are systemic. We say systems are causing poverty. Systems are causing hunger. Systems are causing wars. And so we have to treat them systematically. And for that, and for people in a country like ours, one of the first things we have to do is to be involved in anything which systematically helps others, where we can. That may be some kind of a project in a parish or in a subdivision or in a neighborhood where the needs of others are met or attempted to be met. But on a larger scale, we have to do things like, in a few days, going to the polls and voting for people who promise, at least promise, to help those who are being hurt by systemic evils. We can't do that individually. I cannot change a system. But I can at least go and place people in positions of power who can, if they're faithful to their promises, help those in need systemically, in a systematic way. So that's what this beautiful parable in 3 or 4 sentences means for us. The modern world is not easy, it's complicated, and we have to approach compassion and mercy in a systematic and a complicated way. But there is no doubt that we have to do it, because God said through Jesus, I am compassionate to you. I have mercy on you. Go and do likewise.